Ben Hunt seems to be on the market for 2025. The Dragons have officially granted him permission to negotiate with clubs as of right now. This was sort of always coming, even despite some rumours that came out when the Dragons were going good last year about Hunt actually wanting to stay. Ever since he came out wanting that release during the origin period of 2023, we thought this day would come. But 2025 will mark 10 years since Ben Hunt's infamous grand final moment, and despite probably playing his best career footy in Queensland. So with that in mind, let's talk about the top 3 landing destinations I have for Ben Hunt. And as for the Dragons, if they've given him permission to leave, then I think that's all but gone. Even despite the rumours that came out last year, I do think that Ben Hunt was always going to leave for 2026. Maybe the Dragons are just trying to play big dick here and be on the front foot of this to make themselves look like they're trying to get rid of Ben Hunt. And let's be honest, you're fooling absolutely nobody. We've known Hunt wants to leave for a while now, and yes, Dragons, you had a decent year. Yes, Shane Flanagan, you might be a top 5 coach in the competition, but this is still your prize bull. This is still your captain, and we all know he's been whinging to get out for ages. What is quite sad, though, is I do think the Dragons are on the up. Not that I have them in my 8 next year, but I love the direction they're going with Shane Flanagan. They've recruited really well over the off-season. There is one obvious option I think that all clubs should be chasing when it comes to a young halfback. That is Lockie Ilias. So if I do think the Dragons go out, get him, then I do think it is actually a good save, I guess, for the Dragons. I think Lockie Ilias is just as good of an option, especially considering how young he is for a club at the moment as Ben Hunt. At least for a team like the Dragons who think it's going to be a few more years before they're contending. So that is how I see the situation for the Dragons. But let's stop talking about that. Let's start talking about Mr. Benjamin. And the Gold Coast Titans have been the biggest rumour, and they've been the biggest rumour for quite some time now. That the Gold Coast Titans are an interesting situation. Obviously, they've got Kieran Foran as their main half there, but their 5'8" has really bounced around. It seems they've given up on Tanner Boyd after they already given up on Toby Sexton, after they've already given up on Jamal Fogarty. Now, while I will take the piss out of that for the Titans, considering the way they've managed their halfbacks, I think Ben Hunt is already established enough that you know what you're going to get. The biggest thing and the biggest draw, RCG will be a great addition to an already stacked team that gets Tino back. They've got some extremely good backline weapons, but Ben Hunt, if Desi's trying to build this defensive culture, he doesn't really suit that. The Titans are an interesting one because it seems they've got a lot of hope. They've got some great young talent there. They're just going to have to make these huge decisions. The big one is obviously what they're going to do with these 3 fullbacks. AJ Brimson, who at his best is an Origin star, Keanu Kinney, who is an absolute dog, and Jaden Campbell, who's proven that he's one of the best young playmakers in the comp. Now, I don't think Foran's going anywhere, especially considering I think the wicket he is on isn't too massive, and he's probably only got 1 more year left. All these clubs, considering we're about to start the next season in about a month, will have to do some big management in their salary cap to try and figure out a way to get Ben Hunt in there for next year. I think the casualty will come and maybe a Jaden Campbell or a Keanu Kinney. What's hard is that all 3 of those young fullbacks are signed for a long time. AJ Brimson is the one for me you just simply can't get rid of, because in my opinion, he's probably still the best fullback option, but he's also versatile enough to play in the halves or at centre. The big draw for the Titans is that he can go back home. The Gold Coast is essentially Brisbane. It's no different to Manly and the Roosters. So if Queensland being back there is the biggest thing for Ben Hunt, the Gold Coast Titans makes perfect sense. And it's not like they're so far away from winning a comp. It's going to be interesting to see how they go under a second year with Desi. Ben Hunt is going to add a lot to an attack that is already outstanding. But the same questions with the Titans will remain. But I do think Ben Hunt joining them can make them a genuine top 8 footy team. You just never know with the Gold Coast Titans. If there was a betting market, this is probably the way I'd lean to, just because there's so many assurances that we know that Ben Hunt wants that the Gold Coast Titans do have. But I just think, I don't know how much winning a comp is important to Ben Hunt. And if that's the case, then I don't think he's going to go to the Titans. But at the moment, they're probably the favourite. But if Benny wants to win a comp, I would strongly consider going to the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. The Bulldogs are still in their rebuild phase, which is quite funny to say considering how well they went last year. But they've still got, I think, a lot of salary cap room. Toby Sexton comes off contract at November 1 as well, so he might be pretty easy to move on. They've still got a lot of money saved up for a front rower, and until they can get one of them, I do think they're lacking that. But Ben, I do think if the Dogs can replicate their 2024 season in 2025, and you chuck Ben Hunt in there, I think that's a team that's genuinely good enough to jump up into the top 4. The biggest problem is that Penrith and Melbourne are probably just still so much better than everyone else, but at least for this video, I do think the Bulldogs might be one of the best choices Hunt could go to that's going to have the salary cap room, and that could give Ben Hunt one of his best opportunities to try and win a competition. It doesn't even have to be in 2025. It could be further. Maybe they get Ben Hunt for 25 and then they sign a big dog forward for 26. You build around that with Kickow, with Crichton, with Jacob Preston. The Dogs have already built that great defensive culture, so Hunt could just slide into that. And when it comes to a halves combination, Matt Burton and Ben Hunt on paper could be a top 4 halves combination in the entire competition. They could literally score from anywhere and they would have one of the best dual kicking games in the competition. This would be terrifying for the league, but again, how much does Ben Hunt want to go back to Queensland? I think that's the biggest question when it comes to him going to the Bulldogs. But if I'm Ben Hunt and I want to win a comp and I want some good cash still, then I'm probably heading towards Belmore. But there is a wild card in this scenario, and there's obviously a lot of clubs that could probably throw $1 million plus at Ben Hunt. But if Ben Hunt really wants to move back to Queensland and he really wants to win a comp, then I think there is one club he could go to if he's willing to take a cheeky pay cut. And that, of course, is the Brisbane Broncos. 10 years on from that grand final loss, Ben Hunt could return to Red Hill. He with this Young's core of a squad that they have. But I think if we learn anything, even from Chatty Townsend back in 2022, is that having an older senior halfback in there is great to help build your club and help build the younger guys. Just look at the impact Chad Townsend's had on Tom Dearden. I mean, the Broncos themselves, just look at the impact Adam Reynolds has had on those Broncos young boys. I mean, Luke Brooks is nearly 30, but look at the impact DCE has had on him. They obviously have to make some big salary cap moves. Maybe they do get rid of Reynolds 1 year early to try and get Ben Hunt there and play him at halfback. But I do think you give a year where Hunt is the dummy half, Reynolds is the halfback, then you have a plan to move Hunt back to the 7, and maybe that's when Blake Moser finally becomes the Brisbane Broncos starting dummy half for the future. If I'm Ben Hunt, if moving back to Queensland really means that much to me, if winning a comp means that much to me, as fun as that would be for Hunt and the Brisbane Broncos, I do think the safe bet at the moment is the Gold Coast Titans. But I think it is down to those 3. There are some clubs on paper that I guess it makes sense too. But again, the salary cap restrictions is the fact he wants to go back to Queensland. And I don't think unless you're going to pay him premium dollars, Ben Hunt's going to go anywhere like Newcastle or the Warriors if he's not going to win a comp. So I do think those are the 3 teams with the best chance of signing Ben Hunt. If I had to put it in order, I do think it's the order I said it. I think it goes Titans, Bulldogs, and Brisbane Broncos. But if you went to the Broncos, then I just might have to tip him to win the comp again, despite them letting me down this year. But ladies and gentlemen, where do you think Ben Hunt